together to learn more about how you want to heal us. Thank you for all the information you have given us so that we know how to take care of our bodies and give us wisdom. We ask for your Holy Spirit to be in this place so that it may open our minds and help us to grasp the truths that you want for us today. Help us to be a light to the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, I'll tell you shortly about myself. By the way, I do a seminar, a diabetes seminar at my church every year. My church is the Watsonville Seventh-day Adventist Church in Watsonville, California. Anybody here know where that is? A few of you know where Watsonville is. It's in the county of Santa Cruz. Now I've moved away from Santa Cruz County. I live in the adjacent county, Monterey County. Anybody know where Monterey, California? Yes, many of you know. So I belong to Central California Conference, but I used to belong to Southern California Conference, and I still don't have quite clear which conference do you guys belong to. Is it Southern or Southeast? Southeast. All right, well then, I wasn't in this conference. I used to be part of Southern California Conference. I used to live north of Los Angeles in a town called Oxnard, California. Anybody know where Oxnard, California? All right. More of you know where Oxnard than Santa Cruz is. But now I'm a member of the Central California Conference, and I've been doing this for many, many years. So there's a disclaimer slide, because we do this in our church. And most of the people to come to our church, I don't organize this, by the way. So the credit is not on me. The lady who's in charge of our health ministries just has the ability to invite people. And so she does this every year, and we get 20 to 30 people who are non-Adventists to come to our 6-week diabetes reversal program. So I present this disclaimer telling people that this is not meant to be a treatment. All right, so I don't want this to be a substitute for medical treatment. You still need to go to your doctor. But we've had people who go to their doctor, tell them that they are interested in changing their diet or lifestyle, and then the doctor works with them to sometimes lower prescription medications, and so to adjust their medications accordingly, because a change of diet and lifestyle can be extremely effective. And I'll tell you more about that because I see this every day at work. So my day job, I do this too, and I see it. I see it in individuals. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But let me just give you a little bit of background of myself. I worked as a clinical nutritionist many years in a clinic in Watsonville, California, which is a community clinic. It's something called a federally qualified health center in Watsonville, California. And I work mostly with people with diabetes, both gestational. Does anyone know what gestational diabetes is? Gestational diabetes comes during pregnancy. And it usually goes away, by the way. Supposedly, after the woman gives birth, it goes away. But did you know 50% of women who've had gestational diabetes go on to develop type 2 diabetes? Did you know that? 50% of them? All right. So they are definitely related. So I used to work there many years. This is the fellowship hall at the Watsonville Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so here's the group. This was before COVID, but now it's kind of come back to the same. So for a couple of years, we did it on Zoom, but it's mostly come back to this now, except with different orientations. The room's a little changed. But like I said, we get 20 to 30 individuals from the community. In Watsonville, California is 70% Hispanic. I belong to the English-speaking church, but there's a Spanish-speaking church that we also work with. Now, this is me. And does anyone recognize the gentleman in this picture? Anyone? His name is Milton Teskey. He's a medical doctor. Have you heard of him? Okay, so maybe the name becomes familiar. He used to work with Weimar. They used to do weekend programs on reversing diabetes. So has anyone heard of Weimar? Weimar Institute, the New Start program? Yes. So as you probably know, that's a lifestyle program to improve health. Among that is also diabetes as one of the issues. And so Dr. Teskey worked by going around to places like this and doing whole weekends on reversing diabetes. So that was one of my first introductions of really the lifestyle aspect, because while I worked as a clinical nutritionist, I tried to introduce those things even though I didn't know them so well yet in my mind. But even then, there was a limitation on how much I could say. Let me just repeat that. There's a limitation as to how much I could say to patients while I worked in this federally qualified health center, because everything that I was supposed to say to patients was supposed to be ADA compliant. Do you know what ADA is? American Diabetes Association. And so I was giving patients something slightly different, and sometimes quite different. And one of the dietitians at the hospital, which we work sometimes closely with, called up my medical director and said, hey, that nutritionist you have over there is not giving people ADA compliant diet. So I got in trouble for that. And I said, well, why don't we compare outcomes? We don't do outcomes. All right, well, okay. So let me just tell you that this was in Honduras. The first time I went to Honduras with Dr. Teskey and a group of people from the Fresno Central Seventh-day Adventist Church, it was about 42 people. We went on a mission trip to Honduras, and one of the things we did was a reverse diabetes program in Honduras. This, by the way, was rural Honduras. It was an hour and a half away from the capital, Tegucigalpa. And I thought, there's no way people in rural Honduras are going to have diabetes. That's what I thought. There's no way people are going to have high cholesterol. They live in the country. They grow their own foods. You know, they're probably super healthy. And what do you think? Do you think people were super healthy? That there was no diabetes in rural Central America? Oh, how wrong I was. Somebody said, well, so the little place we went to is about 1 kilometer from the little town. Little town had no paved roads. There was no Costco, no, what's the grocery store? You guys have Stater Brothers or something? None of that. There's not even a light. There's not a traffic light even. But somebody said, you want to know what people eat here? You need to walk to the town and go to one of the little stores. By the way, the little stores were homes that just opened up their window and sold stuff through. You need to go check one of those out. And I walked that kilometer and went to check out what was sold in the little stores. Anybody want to guess what kind of food you think you might find in rural Central America in one of the tiny little stores? Were you guys were there too? How'd you know? Yeah, anything that's fried is fried and then sold in little bags as chips. So plantains, potatoes, yuca, I don't know what, it's like a root. Anything, and anything that could, be sold that has sugar, added colors, oils. I mean, it's just junk food in general. So people over there, of course, had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes. So we did a 6-day, how many days? 6 days. That's it. Do you think you can see a difference in 6 days, anyone? Yes, you can. So in 6 days of feeding them whole food, plant-based, and taking them out for walks, we were able to see amazing. By the way, this lady, she's a nutritionist also. She's from the Fresno Central Seventh-day Adventist Church. She was going to be the one doing the cooking classes in Honduras. So she called me up before we left, and she's like, why don't you bring some do you have any cookbooks that I can use that can help me out, because I'm going to be doing the cooking? I said, sure. So I took a bunch of cookbooks. She took a bunch of cookbooks. When we got there, we didn't use any of our cookbooks. Want to guess why? They didn't even have refrigerators. I don't know if you could tell, way in the back there's a building. Do you see behind the tree? Behind the tree there's a building. That's where they had one room that was the dark room, and that's where they put the food. There was no electricity. In fact, they only put electricity, that 1 kilometer, somebody put a long cable from town so that the Americans can charge their phones. is literally the only source of electricity the first time I went. Now they have solar panels. They have a few buildings that have electricity so that they can connect their computers and do their classes. But back then, she had to figure out how to cook healthy with whatever they had. So the lesson that I learned was you do not need to spend a bunch of money, first of all. You do not need to buy special ingredients. You can eat healthy with very basic foods you can buy at any grocery store. Did you know that? You don't have to buy expensive food. All right. So I'm just giving you a little bit of background of what I do, who I am. But what I want to talk to, just get straight to the topic of today, which is why are diabetes and other chronic diseases so common? And what I want to do in this first presentation is show you the root cause. The what? The root cause. Did you know that the root cause of diabetes is also associated with other metabolic conditions such as hyperlipidemia? What is hyperlipidemia, anyone? When your lipids are high, such as triglycerides, what are other lipids? What are other lipids? So the fat in your blood could be triglycerides. Those are fats in the blood. What other fats sometimes are found? What other lipids? Cholesterol. So all these things can go up in your blood and put you at a higher risk for heart disease and other associated conditions. We'll talk about that because some people are surprised to find out that everything is connected, but everything is connected, and I'll show you why. But why are these things so common today? Well, I'm going to talk to more precisely about diabetes, and as you probably know, there's many types of diabetes, yes? How many types? 3, 2, 1. You're not in agreement. How many? Well, we'll find out. A few. Anyway, there's type 1. You probably are somewhat familiar with type 1 diabetes. I'm not going to go too much into it. It is an autoimmune disease, by the way. And it's usually diagnosed in childhood or at a young age. So it's an autoimmune disease which causes the destruction of what? Of the pancreatic cells, which are the ones that produce what? Insulin. Therefore, the person is going to need what? Insulin for the rest of their lives. In most cases, there's been like a couple of cases where this disease was detected early enough and there was a change. So this is new, okay? I don't know if you heard this, but there's a couple of cases in the literature where children, the disease was detected early enough and they were able to change the diet. There's 2 cases that I'm aware of where they're able to detect the disease early enough and change their diet. And they have lived many years without still needing the insulin. But these are literally 2 cases that I've heard of. So I can't guarantee that everybody's going to have that kind of result. But that's type 1. Have you heard of type 2? Yeah, that's the most common. 90 to 95% of people who have diabetes have type 2. It used to be called, does anyone know? Adult onset. Why is that no longer used? Because kids are getting it. I've seen myself, nobody had to tell me. I saw with my own eyes at the clinic, a child in my office, 12 years old, with diagnosed type 2 diabetes, already taking oral medications for it. She was 5'10", I'm only 5'0", so she was quite taller than me, and 212 pounds at 12 years old. That's a lot. So this is what we find. And that was years ago that I was able to see this with my own eyes, but I know that there's many, many cases like that. So that's type 2. That's mostly what we're going to talk about. But as I mentioned, there's also gestational diabetes that is actually related to the same root cause. So if you know anyone who has gestational diabetes, you can share this information as well. Does anyone know about 1.5? Has anyone ever heard? You heard of 1.5? You've heard of 1.5? Oh, wow, you guys are nice. Anyone else on this side heard of 1.5? What is 1.5? Well, right there, it says, it's called LADA because of the latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So it is also autoimmune. It's an autoimmune diabetes, but it's usually diagnosed later in life. And many times it is confused with type 2, so people are misdiagnosed, and they're given a diagnosis of type 2. They changed their diet, they changed their lifestyle, and despite all their efforts, they're not able to control their blood sugar. And when they go back to the doctor, a doctor that is knowledgeable enough might check their certain antibodies and then figure out there's actually an autoimmune disease. And that's how you would differentiate those two. And so these people have characteristics, if you will, of both type 1 and type 2. Now, what I want to say today also is that everything that I'm going to say will benefit all types of diabetes, even type 1. And you will be maybe surprised to hear that there's such a thing as double diabetes. Has anyone ever heard of double diabetes? No? All right. Well, you're in for a surprise when I tell you what that is. And I will tell you what that is. But there is such a thing as double diabetes. And so what I want to say is that everything I'm going to speak will benefit anyone, any of these types of diabetes. Now, have you ever heard of type 3? Oh, you have. A few of you have. So those of you who have heard of it, type 3, what is it? Very good. Some of you are very, very, very well educated on this subject. So yes, do you see the title of this paper right here? Can you read it? Some of you might need to sit closer to the front so you can read it. I'll read it for you. It says, Alzheimer's disease is type 3 diabetes. That's the title of this paper. And if you were to read the paper, you can just read the abstract and more or less get an idea of what they were saying. They're finding that insulin resistance, insulin what? Resistance happens in the brain. And those changes can therefore lead to also other conditions such as Alzheimer's disease. So I'm going to talk about the root cause in this first presentation because I want you to see the connection, not only between all these different types of diabetes, but between diabetes and other metabolic conditions that are closely associated that are very commonly seen together with diabetes or before diabetes. Let me repeat that. These metabolic conditions sometimes are seen before diabetes, but they are caused by the same thing as diabetes. Does that make sense? Okay, I want to show you what you see on the screen right now is a very simple illustration of what? A cell. And as you can see, there's a little thing on the right side with a G. What do you think that is? It's glucose. What's glucose, by the way? What is? It's a type of sugar. It's a very simple sugar, yes? And how many of you had lunch? I had lunch. It was so good, by the way. Thank you. Thank you for lunch. It was delicious. So I had potatoes and I had sweet potatoes. I had beans. I don't know. I had so many good things. Okay, some of us are digesting all that food, yes? So when we digest all this food, all this yummy food, like all the curry with the potatoes, whoever made it, good job. I'm digesting those potatoes right now, myself. And so some of those long chains of carbohydrates, that's starch, right? Those are long chains of carbohydrates, are being digested. What's digestion do to these long chains of carbohydrates, these molecules that are long and bigger? It breaks them down into smaller pieces so that they can cross the gut barrier, yes, and be absorbed into the bloodstream and then go to all of your cells. So glucose is the fuel. Hear me out. Glucose is the what? Fuel for the cells. But here's a little problem. Do you see that thing around the cell? That little pink thing around it? It's being represented in pink. What is that? The cell membrane. So let's do an illustration. Just like did anyone come with a car this morning? Did anyone drive a car or come in a car to church? What does your car have to have in order for you to be able to get here? Gas. If you don't put gas in your car, if your car is empty, are you able to drive it anywhere? Not very far. So somehow, at some point, you need to put gas, fuel. But you didn't just go to the gas station and start just, right? It has to go into the right place, which is the tank. So you open the little thing, right? And you open the twisty thing. I don't know what it's called. And the cap. I do know what it's called. Never mind. You put the gas in there. So it has to go inside the tank. Yes or no? Yes. Inside the tank. See, I'm keeping you awake. Same thing with the glucose, all right? The glucose doesn't just magically get into the cell. It has to be allowed into the cell. It has to go through a channel, so to speak. This channel is not normally open, just like you have to open that cap to get the gas in. Same thing in your cell. These channels where the glucose goes in, it's like a door. Somebody this morning got here very early and opened the doors. Yes or no? They were probably locked if you were to come at 5 a.m. Yes? Because you probably don't leave your church open all day, all night. Somebody locks it, and somebody shows up Saturday morning and unlocks the door. Same thing in your cell. The glucose has to get in, but somebody has to unlock the door. Who is the deacon, so to speak, in charge of opening the door of the cell so the glucose can come in? Who? Huh? Would you guys say all kinds of different things? I didn't hear you. Insulin. So have you heard of insulin before? Insulin is the one who's going to open that door. So I represented it here as a stick man, but trust me, it does not look like a stick man. It's something else. But basically, I'm trying to picture and give you a picture in your mind of what insulin does. It's basically the same thing as a deacon. They open the door. They unlock the door so that glucose can go where? Inside of what? The cell. So it can do its job. It's the fuel. So it has to go in so it can be used as fuel. But the question that we started this with is, why is there so much diabetes and other metabolic diseases lately? Especially lately, in the last maybe 30, 40, 50 years, it has really increased. Why is that? What's happened in the last, let's say, 40 or 50 years that has changed? I've been hearing a lot of different things. There's been changes to our lifestyle, yes or no? Let's picture our grandparents 100 years ago. And let's picture ourselves now. Have there been changes? Yes? What kind? Oh, okay, here we go. Here we go. Now we're getting into the meat, pun intended, the meat of it, which is changes in our diet, first of all. Was our grandparents or great-grandparents' diet different from what we eat today? Very much. Very much. Let me tell you, when I worked as a nutritionist, clinical nutritionist, I had to work with populations in our county that are very marginalized. And probably the most marginalized populations that we work with are immigrants from Mexico, from a state of Mexico called Oaxaca. Anybody ever heard of Oaxaca, Mexico? So there's a lot of immigrants from Oaxaca, and they don't even speak Spanish. So we have to have a translator. They don't speak English, of course, but they don't speak Spanish. So we have to have a translator. And one of the things we noticed is that people from Oaxaca tended to get diabetes way faster than even just the general Hispanic population or other ethnic minorities. Because there's a lot of ethnic minorities that tend to get diabetes faster, Asian, African American, Hispanics. But especially immigrants who are indigenous, tend to get the diabetes very, very fast. And probably, so there's a lot of different theories as to why this is. But one of the reasons probably is because the lifestyle change is so dramatic. I mean, some of these people come from marginalized situations in Mexico. You see what I'm saying? So they were probably living in huts close to being like literally dirt floors. And then they come to the US, and now their access to food is dramatically bigger. And I'm going to tell you a story real quick, I promise. I had a patient who was about 10 years old, a child, who came with his mom. The child had high cholesterol. I saw a lot of these cases. Children with adult conditions, such as high cholesterol. So this child, 10 years old, comes to me, and I usually do a questionnaire, like a 24-hour recall questionnaire and a food frequency questionnaire. So I'm trying to figure out what this child eats so I can give them the appropriate counseling. And I'm finding out as I do the questionnaire that the child had, like, I don't remember, some kind of fast food. It could have been pizza or burgers. I think it was burgers or something like that, right? So he had a burger. So I'm like trying to find out more background. So I'm trying to figure out how many times a week this child eats fast food. So I asked the mom, how many times a week does he eat fast food? What do you think she might have said? Oh, there's a little boy over there. Please tell us, what do you think? Oh! Wait, how did you know? You're very smart. That's exactly what the mom said every day. So I'm like, okay, trying to, find out more information, and every day is a lot. So I'm like, okay, well, do you mean like 5 days a week? Like, is that every day, or 7 days a week? And what did you think she said? Yeah, you. How do you guys know? So smart. That's exactly what the mom said. 7. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Really? Because I was a little surprised. Would you have been surprised? Maybe not anymore, huh? But back then, this was like 12, 13 years ago. I was like, whoa, 7 days a week? Your child eats fat. I mean, I try not to sound condescending or judgmental, right? But I'm really surprised. Like, really? Your children eat fast food 7 days a week? And she's like, yeah. And so this child here, because he has high cholesterol, right? 10 years old. So I'm like, so do you know that fast food can raise people's cholesterol? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, where she's coming from. She's like, yeah. And so I'm just like so surprised. I didn't know what to say. I was like, at some point I'm like, so how come? How come do you know that the high cholesterol can then be a risk for heart disease and other conditions? She's like, yeah. I mean, she's just saying yes to everybody. I'm like, oh. So at some point I'm like, so how come? How come you take your child to eat fast food every day? And the answer she gave me, I never forgot. Because she said, when I was growing up, my parents could not afford this. We didn't have this growing up. I didn't have this growing up. So now that I can, I'm going to give my children what I didn't have. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I understand. I get it. It's not a good thing, right? But can you relate maybe to this kind of thinking? Anyone? Yes, that's right. That's right. But this is one of the factors that has changed so much. And this is why we see children. Literally, the youngest person I saw with my own eyes, nobody had to tell me, with high cholesterol. You want to guess what age? 3 years. The one I saw, 3 years of age, about this tall. Go ahead. Ukraine? McDonald's in Ukraine?
We were little, we didn't have McDonald's in our country. But as soon as they started having McDonald's, people started to having all sorts of disease, like being obese and cholesterol and all that stuff that comes from
I believe it.
McDonald's and places like that.
Yes, I believe you. Yes, yes. Because I actually was born in Chile, South America. And I came to this country in 1988. That's a long time ago, huh? I'm kind of letting you know how old I am. I came as a teenager in 1988. There were no McDonald's in Chile in 1988. And now if you go back, Chile, Argentina, Peru, Brazil, Bolivia. Well, actually, Bolivia, they kicked them out. But every other country in South America, full of McDonald's and Starbucks and Taco Bells and Kentucky Fried Chickens. Everywhere. This is a global phenomenon. Every country, Asia, Africa, Europe, every continent, maybe not Antarctica, but just about everywhere else, yes.
My sister and I went to China, it was in the 90s, or no, 2000, early 2000. And they had even the smallest place we went to had Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Kentucky, that's the big one over there. They had them like 3 stories.
Oh, 3-story Kentucky Fried Chicken. Well, they are even way above and beyond what we have over here. So what I'm trying to say is this thing is everywhere. So the point I was trying to make, see how you guys have to please me. You have to go, stop talking. You're talking too much. The point I'm trying to say is that our current lifestyle, along with the lack of exercise and the change of the food, has created a change in just about everybody's metabolism. And so what we're seeing is a new phenomenon. Obviously, you've noticed that there's an epidemic of obesity, yes? And so that is accumulation of fat tissue, right? What's the other word for fat tissue, by the way, anybody? Adipose tissue. But here's the thing. It's not just adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is almost visible except for visceral fat that's inside by the organs. But everything, you know what I'm talking about, right? What are those things called on the side? Love handles, tires, whatever you want to call them. They're usually visible. But there's a type of fat that is not visible. And it's the one that accumulates inside the what? Inside the cells. That's what we're trying to see. That fat is starting to accumulate inside of skeletal muscle cells, which does not belong. Also inside of other cells where it doesn't belong, like, where else might fat be accumulating? The liver. Anybody ever heard of fatty liver? Anybody? It doesn't belong there. That's why there's another word that's being used now to describe this type of fat. Ectopic fat. Anybody ever heard of the word ectopic? Ectopic. Have you ever heard of in conjunction with pregnancy, for instance? Ectopic pregnancy. What does that mean? Anybody? Outside of the uterus. It's a medical emergency if there's an ectopic pregnancy and the woman has to be taken to a hospital and that needs to be extracted because the baby did not implant in the right place and then therefore produce, that the fallopian tubes, for instance, can be ruptured. The woman can die. That's an ectopic pregnancy. Have you ever heard of this word before? Well, that word is now being applied to fat. Ectopic fat. What do you think it means? Fat where it doesn't belong, like your skeletal muscle cells. And what happens is, when the fat starts to accumulate inside the cell, it interferes. This is a key word for today. The fat interferes with insulin. So it's almost like a block. Do you see that door over there? Before, after. The fat blocks the door. So it's as if the deacon or whoever was in charge of opening the church this morning came to church Sabbath morning, try to open the door, and there's a piece of gum in the lock. Are they going to be able to unlock the door if there's a piece of gum? No. It's kind of like what happens in the cell when there's, and here's the technical word if you want to look it up. The scientific word for what I'm saying is intramyocellular lipid. Has anyone ever heard of that before? I'll say it again. Intramyocellular lipid, which means fat inside of the cell, which interferes with the action of insulin. Therefore, if insulin is not able to open the door, what happens? Exactly. So the glucose starts to accumulate where? Outside of the cell, which means the blood. And so now you go to a clinic, to a doctor, a hospital, fasted. They take maybe a drop. They can take, also a lot of blood, take it, send it to a lab. But they can also just do one drop, literally one drop of blood, put it in a glucometer. Do you all know what glucometer is? Little strip. You put the blood, the drop in the strip, and then the glucometer tells you, oops, 150 or 160 or 170. Fasted. Is that a lot? Yes, that's a lot. And that's what we see. I see a lot of people come fasted. In fact, sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 105. So they're not diabetic yet, but it's also not normal, right? Why is it high again? Why is the glucose in the blood high? Because it can get inside the cell. Why? Why can it not get inside the cell? Because something is blocking the... Who's opening that door? The insulin. The insulin is being blocked from working. And what's blocking it again? The fat. Does that make sense? This condition has a name. What's the name? Insulin resistance. Does that make sense now, the name? Does that make sense? The insulin is being resisted. It's not working properly. Is it there? Because a lot of people think diabetes comes from lack of insulin. But is the insulin there right now? Yes, it is. In fact, when this starts to happen, who is in charge of making insulin? The pancreas. So the pancreas detects, oops, there's too much sugar in the blood. I'm going to try to do something to help. What can the pancreas do to help? Make more. So boom, 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 boom. You see? More little stick men. Is that the problem, though? No. That's not the problem. It might help. So obviously this illustration kind of falls off because it actually does help a little bit in that all of these stick men at some point kind of force some of that blood glucose into the cell. But does that mean this is normal? Is this normal? No, it's not normal. So hear me out, even if your blood sugar does not qualify as diabetes, it might still be higher than normal, higher than optimal, and you might still have this condition, which again, what is the name? Insulin what? Resistance. Is this ideal? Is this desirable? I'm going to show you now, this is of course my illustration. I'm going to show you more of a textbook illustration. So I don't know how many of you see from back there. But up above we see the normal cell. The red dots are glucose. The blue, they're not dots, I think they're stars, whatever they are. The blue ones are insulin. And in the top illustration, we see the channels. Do you see those things where through which the glucose is going into the cell? Those are the channels. But do you see the bottom illustration? Some of them are grayed out. They're not working anymore. And this doesn't show, but this one shows why. Do you see those? Well, this one shows them as green. It depends on the computer, I guess. Some of them show sometimes yellow dots. They more look like green, yeah? Do they look green or yellow to you? They look green to me. Okay, let's make sure my eyes are still working. But those green, yellowish little balls are representing do you see the wording actually is right there, some of you who can read those letters. Intramyocellular lipid. It's right there, those little balls. What's the intramyocellular lipid again? It's the fat. Now, this representation is not as anatomically correct, but I'm going to skip this right now. I'm going to show you real quick the more anatomically correct way. I'm going to come back to all of this, okay? Because I wanted to show you, maybe I didn't put them. Maybe I didn't put them. Never mind. We'll see if maybe tomorrow. I think I put them, or I mean the second presentation. I'll show you a better picture of what a cell looks like. But also here you can see healthy, type 1 and type 2. Healthy, glucose works well, insulin works well. Type 1, no insulin. Do you see the red cross where it shows that no insulin production? That's type 1. But type 2, there is insulin production. That's the bottom one, right? The bottom pancreas, that's type 2. It shows there is insulin production, but yet glucose outside of the cell is too high because the cell is not responding properly to the insulin. That's the difference. And your pancreas may be working extra. In fact, your pancreas may be producing 2, 3, 4, 5 times the normal amount of insulin. That's called hyperinsulinemia. Anybody ever heard of this? So your pancreas can be working way, trying to make up for the fact that your glucose is too high. How would you know if that's happening? How can you know? Well, if you have an enlightened doctor, they might measure your insulin, but you might not. I want to show you this table. Is from a book called Goodbye Diabetes. Has anyone here read it? You have read it? Wes Youngberg. Anybody ever heard of Dr. Wes Youngberg? All right, he's really good. So this table comes from this book. And the reason why I include it is because I've never seen it anywhere else. Nobody else really talks about this the way he presents it. And what I want to emphasize about this table is that he has different stages. Do you see the top row? It says stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 5. Stage 5 is diabetes. So if you have your glucose tested in the morning, fasted, and your blood glucose is above 126, that's considered diabetes. And in fact, if your glucose is above 200 any time of the day, it's considered diabetes. But what if your glucose is below 126? Let's say it's 110. Then what? You can look up at that table, and you look up fasting. That's the row that says fasting. And you see that 100 is stage 3. I don't know if you could see it. Stage 3 is considered what? It's considered pre-diabetes. So if your blood glucose fasted, you measure it, and it's between 100 and 125. That's considered what? Pre-diabetes. All right, that's all clear. Because if you go to the doctor, that's what they will say. But what if it's not even 100? What if tomorrow morning you go to the hospital or the clinic and they measure your blood sugar and it's 95? Then what? What will they say at the clinic, doctor, hospital, whatever? What would they say, usually? That you're normal. Literally, that you're good. That's good. You don't qualify as pre-diabetes. You don't qualify as diabetes. Congratulations. You don't have anything. And you're like, yay. But is everything good at 95? I mean, does literally your body just kind of switch on pre-diabetes at exactly 100? Or what's going on? Well, what's going on is that this is a process that starts off with the first step, and we already mentioned it's called insulin resistance. This is a process. It may take years. It may take a decade or two, in fact. So it starts off as your body resisting the insulin because of what's blocking it again? Excess fat inside the cells. But your pancreas compensates. So now it's producing extra insulin. So your blood sugar might come up as, say, 90 or 95. And you go to the doctor and they congratulate you because you have nothing. You're perfectly healthy. But are you? And here's the thing that this table has that other tables don't. I've never seen it anywhere else. Do you see there stage 1 high blood sugar and stage 2 high blood sugar? It's basically above optimal. What Dr. Wes Youngberg defines as optimal is between 70 and 84. Above that, something is no longer ideal. Probably your body is trying to compensate for something because it's no longer optimal. And what he did is that he actually went to Guam for many years, worked with the government of Guam to try to reduce diabetes and prediabetes because it was sky high in Guam at the time. And so after so many years working there, he noticed that there were a lot of young people who didn't have diabetes, who didn't even have pre-diabetes, but they were already suffering from the complications of high blood sugar. How is it possible to suffer from complications of high blood sugar if you're not even diabetic yet? You see what I'm saying? Why? Because you have insulin resistance that your body is overcompensating for, so you don't detect it. It comes up as quote-unquote normal, air quotes, because it's not normal. The insulin resistance that we saw, that body trying to compensate and you're, resisting the action of insulin, your body producing too much, and there's fat inside the cells, all of that is metabolically unhealthy. And you can already start to suffer from the, what did I say? Consequences, the complications of having high blood sugar before you have prediabetes. What are those complications, by the way? What are those complications of high blood sugar? So here's another table that also comes from Dr. Wes Youngberg. He worked with other people, and they came up with this one. It's a lot more complicated. As you can see, it's a lot busier. But I want to call your attention to the bottom row, because that bottom row is talking about the complications. And if you can read that bottom row, it says increased heart disease risk. And it doesn't start with diabetes. It doesn't even start with pre-diabetes. It starts even before that. Above optimal blood sugar is when people start to see the development of these complications. That's why I think it's too late. Well, not necessarily, because this can be reversed. But why wait? My point is, why wait until you have prediabetes? Why wait until you have diabetes when you can prevent all of this way ahead of time? Because it's not a switch that you turn on one day. This is a process that can take years. So you start off with that extra fat in the cells, that intracellular lipid. Your body starts to resist it. You start with the hyperinsulinemia. And all of these complications can start to occur. But you can start reversing that. That's 100% reversible. That's the good news, yes? The good news is all of this is reversible. Unfortunately, most people don't know about it. And so this can go on and on for years. And these are some of the complications, okay? Here are some of the things that come along with the insulin resistance. Weight gain. So people start just gaining more weight because of the insulin. Did you know that people who have type 1, for instance, and start injecting insulin, I've seen patients gain 20 to 30 pounds in 1 month because of the insulin. Insulin is a fat storage hormone. So when your body starts to produce more of it, what's going to happen? You're going to start storing more fat. That's just what's going to happen, just as a result of more insulin in your blood. That's one. High blood pressure. This is one of the complications of insulin resistance. Most people don't even know about it. They might be hypertensive. Their blood sugars are maybe 90, so they think no problem with the blood sugar. But they have hypertension. And it's intimately related with the insulin resistance. They just don't know about that. You see? Next is low, good cholesterol and high Bad cholesterol. You all know what I'm saying with good and bad cholesterol? So the bad cholesterol is the LDL. That's the one that starts to accumulate inside of where? Inside of where? The arteries. The arteries, particularly coronary, where are those? In the heart. Those are the ones that feed your heart, basically. So if those get clogged, what happens? Heart attack. And what happens when a heart attack happens? What's going on in the heart? Right, that tissue is not being, oxygen is not being fed by the blood. There's a blockage. Yes, there's a blockage. And that tissue dies. That's basically what happens. It dies. You can see it. If you ever had the chance to see a cadaver with a heart that has had infarctions, you can tell they're like these black dots where the tissue has died. I've seen it, little dots on someone's heart where the infarction happened. So then we have, what are triglycerides? What are triglycerides? What's the definition? What's a triglyceride? It's a fat. It's a fat in the blood. And so does it play a role, you think, in heart disease? Yes, it does. Not as big as LDL cholesterol, apparently, but still. Then you see people with blood sugar that are too high and then too low. My dad, by the way, he's passed away almost 23 years now. But his diabetes was so bad. It would go up to 600, go down to the 30s. When you're down in the 30s, you can have something called a diabetic coma. He had it 3 times. 3 times we were given a call. Your dad's probably not going to survive the night. Pray. So we would pray all night. And he would survive the night. He was a miracle. He was a walking miracle. I don't know how he survived those 3 times in a diabetic coma. But that's what can happen. Too high, too low. Your body's just not compensating anymore for this. Fatty liver, we'll talk a little bit about that. And increases in other things that apparently are unrelated. Alzheimer's disease, apparently unrelated, right? What does Alzheimer's disease have to do with diabetes? It does. Because the insulin resistance is happening where also? In the brain. Cancers. Did you know some of these cancers, such as breast cancer, is very intimately related with the amount of sugar in your blood? Did you know? Other cancers are also related to blood sugars. So here's the liver. The one on the left is an insulin-sensitive liver, a normal liver. The one on the right is an insulin-resistant liver, also known as a fatty liver. Do you see the differences there? Particularly in the yellow dots, which represent fat. Lots of more fat, yes? A fatty liver, obviously, the name says it's right. It's fatty liver by definition. But notice the cholesterol. Do you see the red dots on the sensitive and the insensitive? There's a lot more cholesterol. Your liver is producing a lot more cholesterol. It has a lot more fat. And the problem is that all of this fat spills out of the liver. Let me repeat that. All of this fat, the triglycerides, the cholesterol extra that your liver is producing spills out of the liver into where? The circulation. So now you have all these issues. First of all, you see the green triangle? That one's the insulin. So you have hyperinsulinemia because your body's overcompensating. So hyperinsulinemia, number 1. Number 2, hypercholesterolemia means high cholesterol. You're just spilling out. Number 3, hyperglycemia, which means what? Too much sugar. And lastly, hyperlipidemia, which is lipids, fats, fatty acids spilling out. You see all these 4 things going on at the same time? Do you see why all these things are related? This can and then harden your arteries, your blood pressure goes up, then all these fat starts to accumulate around the artery, especially in the heart. Now you have heart disease risk in the brain. Now you have Alzheimer's. I mean, it's on and on. All these things are connected. And that's why there's too high. Go ahead. How can you stop this? These kids, I love them. I will talk about that next. Yes, you can stop it because all of these things can start to happen in your body. I'm not even going to read this. You all know about it. High mortality, statin medications, hypertension, plaque, blah, blah, blah. The two main causes are, number one, too much fat, whether we eat it. Are there skinny people with diabetes? Yes. It's not just the fat we carry, it's the fat we eat. You can be very skinny and still have diabetes because we're eating too much fat. I'm going to talk about the keto diet in the next presentation. I'm going to talk about that because that's the one thing that now our people are resorting to, the keto diet. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing that's happening is that we're not burning it. We're not burning all the extra calories. Therefore, they accumulate as fat. Yes. So, I promised you I would tell you about double diabetes. This is what double diabetes is. Even people with type 1, meaning they have an autoimmune disease, their body doesn't produce insulin, they have to inject insulin for the rest of their lives. But people with type 1 can develop insulin resistance. So they have the type 1, but now they're developing type 2 also in a way because they're developing insulin resistance. So now they have double diabetes. Do you see what I'm saying? People with type 1 are also insulin resistant. Now, instead of using 10 or 20 units, now they're using 30, 40, next month 50. I mean, they're on and on increasing the amount of insulin they need. A lot of people, by the way, insulin is not cheap yet. They're trying to change the policies and trying to, make it so that it's affordable. But some people still cannot afford it. Some people don't have insurance. You know what some people do? They use less of it. People with type 1 are using less of what they need. Some people have died because they cannot afford the insulin they need. But here's the thing. Even people with type 1 can reduce their need for insulin. In other words, they don't have to use as much if they follow a lifestyle that will decrease the insulin resistance. So instead of using 20, 30, 40, 50, now they can only use what's called the physiological amount, which is whatever their pancreas would make. They don't need to use extra. Does that make sense? That's double diabetes. People would have type 1 or autoimmune, but they need more and more and more. That's what double diabetes is. Now, many, many years ago, a researcher took healthy individuals, healthy, not with diabetes, and was done many years ago. This is an experiment that was done last century. They put people who were healthy, non-diabetic, to eat either a high-fat diet or a high-carbohydrate diet. What were the two choices again? High-fat, high-carbohydrate, and then measure their blood sugar. Now, here's a trick question for you. Which one of those two groups do you think had a higher blood sugar? High fat or high carbs? I hear two different answers. Because, and it's true, everywhere I go, people have okay, well, some of them will say high fat, some of them will say high carbs. So, do you want to? Both! I love these children. They're very, very engaged. Well, let me show you. Here's the result. The F, you know what that means? And the C? Which one had higher blood sugar? These are non-diabetics now, okay? Because obviously if you already have diabetes, you're not metabolizing the carbs anymore. But if you don't have diabetes, which one will cause a higher increase in blood sugar, fat or sugar? See what's going on here? Here it is. By the way, this has been replicated. I'm just showing you, okay? That it is not only the carbs. Of course, if we drink Coca-Cola all day and eat Oreo cookies, by the way, Oreos are vegan. Does that mean they're healthy, though? See what I'm saying? Okay, we can talk about it for way too long. But here's the thing. You can eat vegan. You can eat non-fat. But too much sugar. You're going to eat too many calories, you're still going to gain weight, right? Too many calories. But what's going to primarily increase the blood sugar, the F, too much fat, will make you insulin resistant. Did you know? I go to a lot of churches. I ask people, what do you think causes diabetes? People raise their hand. I heard a man who drank so much that he got diabetes and then he died. Oh, so the Coke is the Coca-Cola. Well, yes, the Coca-Cola has a lot of calories. So if you're drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, that calories, those extra calories are transformed into adipose tissue. But it's primarily the fat that's actually causing us to be insulin resistant. Now, let me tell you about prediabetes real quick. Do you know how many people are pre-diabetic? In my work, so I work with a nonprofit organization, non-Adventist, but my boss was inspired by a movie called, have you ever heard of the movie? Boy, now I forgot the name of the movie, but by Nelson Campbell, not in the Forks Over Knives, Plant Pure Nation. It's called Plant Pure Nation. Nelson Campbell, the son of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, made a movie, and he took people for 10 days, gave them a whole food plant-based diet, and then they, before and after biometrics, measured the people's blood glucose and cholesterol and blah, blah, blah. Well, my boss was inspired by this and created a nonprofit, and that's what we do. We basically take people's biometrics before, then we give them a 10-day menu. We tell them to eat, healthy foods, and then we measure the biometrics after. But when we first started, she's like, well, we don't have a group to do it with. In the movie, they go to a church in South Carolina, I want to say somewhere, and they partner with a church. And she tells me, we should do it with a church. Do you know any church? Oh, I know a church. You want to do it with my church? Well, it wasn't my church. It was a Spanish church in my town. And she's like, yeah, let's do it with the Spanish church. So I went to the church, and I said, hey, you guys want to do a 10-day program? Like in Daniel. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. All right. So we came December of 2022. We measured everybody's blood sugar, fasted. 34 adults, only one had normal blood sugars, optimal. 1 out of 34. Over 95% of them, I don't know, 90-something percent, were pre-diabetic. They had no idea. So let me give you the statistics. Pre-diabetes, half of adults after the age of 40 are pre-diabetic. This isn't even considering people who are insulin resistant, right? Because there's more of them. These are just people who have pre-diabetes. After the age of 60, it's 2/3. After the age of 74, 3/4 of adults in North America are pre-diabetic. The problem is this, though, for me anyway, because I have a heart for children who are developing adult conditions before the age of 15. These are things, okay, any of you past the age of 50 at all? Anybody? Yeah, a few of you. When you were growing up, did you have classmates who had hypertension or high cholesterol? I didn't. Our clinic went and did a survey in our town. 50% of children were obese. Today, I see children at the age of 10, 7, 3 with high cholesterol, hypertension. These things did not happen 50 years ago. That's why I'm so passionate, because children are developing adult conditions like hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes type 2. And with children, the general population, these are children, not children anymore, some of them are young adults, because these are kids born after the year 2000. So this is when the survey was done. After the year 2000, kids who are born have 1 in 3 risk of developing diabetes in their lifetime in the United States. 1 in 3 in the general population, but in ethnic minorities, Hispanics, and African Americans is 1 in 2. 50% of our kids will be diabetic. They will be diabetic. This is what the statistics say, because we haven't changed much in the last 10 years. We're still kind of eating the same stuff. So unless we make a pretty dramatic change, our kids will be diabetic, half of them. The other half will probably have other things, right? So that's why I'm passionate. That's why I speak with this with passion. Because this is what's happening. And most of our members, even church members, and we are, you all seen Netflix, right? The Blue Zones thing, and now they're doing the other one. It's brand new, it just came up. My sister told me about it, and she's like, have you watched this? You know the new one that came up on Netflix? It's the twin experiment they're doing, and they talk about Loma Linda. You guys are neighbors of the only blue zone in all of North America, right? We are privileged. I'm sorry to say, but we are. We are privileged. We have a message. If you go to the Jehovah's Witness, you go to, I don't know, Catholic Church, they don't have this. They have no clue, no sense of how to eat healthier. Because my boss is like, well, let's go to the Catholic Church. I'm like, I don't know anybody there, but even if I did, they have no clue of a whole food plant-based diet. We have it. We've had it for over 100 years. So even in our church, to see these kinds of diseases is sad because we have the information. Anyway, you see, you guys are supposed to be sane, remember? Anyway, what are the risk factors? Obviously, overweight and obesity, but it's not just the weight. Because people can be normal BMI and have excess what? Yes, you can have normal BMI and be obese. BMI is not everything it's supposed to be. So it's not just the weight, but it's, you see over here the yellow and red? The yellow and red over here, the tissue, what's inside of us, the balance between the red, which is what you think the red tissue is in this case. It's the muscle. And what's the yellow? It's the fat. You can be normal BMI and have excess fat, so it's not just the weight, it's the body composition. Okay, so that's risk factor. Risk factor number 2, obviously the rich diet or the SAD diet. What's the SAD diet again? Standard American diet, obviously too much sugar and fat, lack of exercise, someone mentioned. Some people tell me, well, you know, I have diabetes because my mom had it, my dad, my cousins, all my uncles. Therefore, I got diabetes. I got it. I didn't do anything. I got it. You see what I'm saying? I received it. It's not my fault. What do you think about this? Genetics. Is it genetic? Well, here's the thing. If you do have relatives who have, especially direct relatives, mom, dad, son, daughters, or siblings who've had diabetes, are you at a higher risk, yes or no? Yes, you are. In fact, not only direct relatives, but your ethnic origin. So ethnic origin definitely is a predisposition to diabetes. But I'm going to tell you a story. Do you know what group in the U.S. has the highest level of diabetes of all ethnic groups? Oh, some of you are very, 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 very well informed. Pima Indians, they live in Arizona. But here's the thing, okay? Did you know that 700 years ago, this tribe of indigenous people in North America actually split? Did you know? 700 years ago, they split. Some of them stayed in the north. Some of them went to the south. What's in the south of the United States? Hello? Mexico. Northern Mexico, there's a state, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the word Chihuahua. I have a dog, Chihuahua. But that's not it. It's a state of Chihuahua. And in the mountains, there's some people who are genetically identical to the Pima Indians. Did you know this? There's a tribe in northern Mexico. What's their name? Anybody? Anybody know? Tarahumaras. See, you're very well informed. The Tarahumaras Indians in northern Mexico are practically the cousins of the Pima Indians in the U.S. But what's the difference? The difference is Pima Indians are #1 ethnic group with diabetes in the U.S. The Tarahumara Indians have one of the lowest rates of diabetes in the world. By the way, they're well known all over the world because they run. They're runners. They do 100-mile races. So, and they come up in the first 10. They're all over the place, US and Europe. They're women run. There's a Netflix thing called Lorena. Lorena something, she's a runner. It's a really cute story if you ever want to watch their background information. They're long distance runner. But anyway, obviously they're very physically active, but they also have some of the lowest rates of diabetes in the world. So is it 100% genetic? That's my question. Is it 100% genetic? No. Genes are just a predisposition. It is the lifestyle that makes the difference. So when it comes to diabetes, it ages you faster. Your lifestyle can age you faster. Your chronological age and your biological age might not be the same. You might be aging your body way too fast. Increase, if you have prediabetes, your increase of heart disease risk is 50%. But if you have diabetes, it's 400%. So it's clogging your arteries, and 75% of diabetics either die of a stroke or a heart attack. That's what's happening. They don't die of diabetes necessarily. Most of them die of a heart attack or a stroke. And of course, there's other complications like renal failure, blindness. I met a lady 40 years old who was completely blind because of her diabetes. 40 years old. I couldn't believe it. Of course, amputations. I mean, I can go on and on. The good news, this is reversible. One time I was giving a class at my clinic, and one of the doctors at the clinic referred a lot of her patients to me, and I was going to do a group class. And she's like, oh, can I come? I'm like, yes, of course. So she came to, it was going to be a 4-session class. She came to the first class. She was going to do the intro, the medical aspects of diabetes. So she got up, and there was a group of about 15 people, and she said, oh, do you all have diabetes? And they're like, yeah, well, they all have diabetes. Well, you're going to have it forever. Because diabetes, once you have it the rest of your life. So I was like, oh. I didn't want to say anything because out of respect. But the second thing she said was, if you're not using insulin, you will. Because all diabetics eventually have to use insulin. And I was like, no. I wanted to tell them that this was a reversible disease. I said nothing out of respect. But the second class, I basically said, look, there's new research out there, and many doctors might not know. They're busy people. They might not have read the latest research on how diabetes is actually reversible, for most people anyway. They've done the statistics out of Weimar, and of all the 40-some years they've been doing the New Start program, people obviously have to go home after doing the New Start program. Once you go home, if you stick with it, at 3 months they do a follow-up. And if you stick with it, over 90% of their patients have reversed the diabetes by the 3-month mark. But even after 18 days, 50% of diabetics come out of Weimar without diabetes. 50%. So type 2 is reversible. Prediabetes is 100% reversible. Insulin resistance is 100% reversible. Is that good news? Yes? Good, because I'll tell you more about it. By the way, I have people fight me on this. They're like, no. My doctor said it was not reversible. Well, here is a consensus statement from the ADA. Remember who the ADA were? American Diabetes Association. Look at what they say. What's the title here? How do we define the what? I didn't say it. They said it. Good thing they used the word. I didn't use the word, the C word, because people get in trouble for saying that diabetes can be cured. But they say in it. So they give you a definition, 1 year or 5 years, whatever. Basically, they're saying as long as you keep your blood sugar below the threshold for at least 1 year without the use of medication, they say it's remission. Remission, cure, reverse, it doesn't matter. What matters is you no longer have it. Isn't that good news? I think that's good news. So we're going to talk about it in the second session. We're going to take a little break, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to tell you more about the foods that particularly can help reverse diabetes. Want to know more about that? Yes. Stick around. I'll try to be very quick, okay, and get you guys out of here, but I just get so passionate about it. So let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back in 5 minutes, and I'll tell you more about the foods that help to reverse diabetes. God bless you. Thank you.
Can I borrow that for a second? Happy Sabbath, everyone. Sorry. I know we're having an afternoon program. Please be mindful with all of the snacks we brought into the church. Make sure we take them out. After fact, make sure the church remains clean. And in the future, possibly, if we could eat in the foyer as opposed to in the sanctuary, just a gentle reminder. Wish you all the best. Happy Sabbath.
Okay, let's get started so that we can we be out of here soon. I just wanted to let you know that the reversal of diabetes by reversing insulin resistance is nothing new. Some of you might have read some of these books, have heard about this from before, but this paper talks about precisely the remission or reversal of diabetes, and it could be done in a safe, sustainable manner. I have mentioned Weimar before. They've been doing it for over 40 years. They've had their statistics. It's absolutely doable. But it costs money, of course. If you don't have the money, maybe you have $10 or $15 and you can buy a book. So there's a few books that I recommend. My favorite is Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Have you ever heard of Joel Fuhrman? Some of you might have heard about him. He's really, really good. He's one of my favorite presenters as well. But Dr. Neil Barnard is another one. He's done the research. I'll show you some of his research in a little bit. It's really remarkable. There's also books on reversing heart disease, like from Dr. Dean Ornish, who I had the chance to see in Colorado a few months ago. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who I've also had the chance to meet personally. I want to say a few words in Spanish. Is there Spanish people, español? Oh, there's a few of you. Okay, voy a decir unas palabras en español. They asked me to say a few words in Spanish. Yo escribí un libro de diabetes, porque la mayoría de los libros que habían de diabetes son en inglés. Yo escribí uno en español con la información de cómo revertir la diabetes. Pueden entrar a mi página de internet, que les voy a dar en un momento. Pero todo esto está en español. Primero que nada, mi libro. Segundo que nada, tengo un curso online de cómo revertir la diabetes. Es más de 6 horas de información en español con recetas, con mucha información. Si ustedes quieren tomar el curso o ver los videos gratis en YouTube, les voy a dar mi página internet. Es saludparahoy.com. Pueden entrar a mi canal de YouTube, ver los videos gratis. Pueden entrar a mi página, comprar el libro, el recetario, el curso de diabetes, ¿ok? ¿Preguntas para los de español? Saludparahoy.com. I just wanted to give my Spanish website because I did write the book, literally wrote the book in Spanish because there's already a bunch of books in English. It was really needed in Spanish. So I wrote a book in Spanish and I just gave the website. I just wanted to say how come some of these things are not well known today, some of the things that I talked to you before. I'll just briefly say what I think, okay? This is my opinion on why a lot of this information is not available. But number one, the scientific research takes a long time. So the scientific research is already out there, but it takes sometimes decades, sometimes a whole generation for it to trickle down from the academic level to the practice level. Especially because doctors have been trained a certain way, and that's how they practice, and there's no changing them because they don't want to, necessarily change what they've already learned, right? And also, doctors are busy people. I work with medical doctors who had to see 20 to 30 patients a day. Who's going to want to go home and read stuff after seeing 30 patients? I probably wouldn't. So it takes time. Most doctors, by the way, think most patients wouldn't want it, and maybe they are right about some of them. Some people would rather have the pill. Yes or no? Yes, it's easier just giving the pill, doctor. In fact, we as patients, if we go to the doctor and they don't give us the medication, we get upset. That doctor's a bad doctor. He didn't give me anything, right? So we want them to give us the pill and just go home and take the pill. So they're kind of right, but I think, this is my personal opinion, I think doctors, especially now that we have the information on how to reverse some of these diseases, I think doctors should give patients the option. But there should be in hopefully every community, some kind of program where patients can go to if they want to do the lifestyle route. So ideally, in an ideal world, doctors would say, do you want the pill or do you want to reverse this with lifestyle? And right? Don't you think? I think so too.
Or refer them to a dietitian.
Refer them, who knows?
The expertise
Yes.
in nutrition.
Yes.
Doctors don't even get a nutrition class.
Right, exactly. So most doctors go through 4 years of medical school, zero nutrition. But we need to have the community programs that do this. And here's the thing. I was talking to a doctor from Weimar one time, and she said, you know, we get a lot of non-Adventists to come to Weimar. And it's true. They get a lot of non-Adventists to come to Weimar. They go through the 18 days, and at the end of the 18 days, they were going to go home. And you know what she said? She said a lot of patients asked her, can you give me the address of the Seventh-day Adventist church in my city so I can go and do a program over there? And she's like, oh, well, most churches don't do this. Isn't this sad? I'm sorry. I'm an Adventist. I've been an Adventist for 40 years or whatever. I am kind of a little bit embarrassed to say that we don't have these programs at every church all the time. I think churches should be the center of information and light in every community. And that every church should be a place where people can go find healing. That's what I think. Anyway, go on. Also, medical journals nowadays are mostly sponsored by pharmaceuticals. I'm sorry to say, but that's just the truth. So the doctors are reading all the, research studies done by pharmaceuticals. And they're going to pay for things that help sell their products. They're not going to pay for, studies about broccoli. They're not going to do that. I mean, it's just the bottom line. They're not going to pay for studies that have to do with lifestyle because that takes away from their sales. I mean, I'm just saying, this is just reality.
We sponsor a lot of the CDs too.
Yes, that's true. So even for nutritionists, honestly, you go to a nutrition conference and a lot of the sponsors, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Doritos, honestly, this is the reality we live in. We have the truth. We have the light. We need to use it to help the world. What's that? We should, not only for ourselves, because it's not just to keep, it's to spread. Why?
Because we don't want to go to the extra form of fixing food that is decent for us.
Yes. I want to tell you something. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my work. I work for a nonprofit, non-Adventist nonprofit, but we have a program. The English name was Community RX. I told my boss that's not going to be translatable to Spanish really well. Let's just put a whole different name in Spanish. So we called it Salud en tu plato. In Spanish makes more sense. But Community RX sounds great in English, so we kept the English name. But it's basically a nutrition immersion program. So as I told you before, we do the biometrics before, we do biometrics after. We give them 10 days. We're not police. We don't go to people's homes to see what they're eating. We just tell them, here, eat this. I don't know if they eat it or not. Most people don't because we do a little survey at the end. And some people don't follow it 100%. Some people might follow it 80%, 90%, 95%. Some people follow it 100%. But we have noticed that, the more closely they follow the nutrition and education that we give them, the better outcomes they see at the end. So I'm going to show you the results of our first year. So we have a 3-year grant. I'll show you the results at the end of the first year of the grant. So these are our averages of the first year. As I told you, our first group was a Seventh-day Adventist church, 34 individuals, adults. Almost all of them were, number 1, pre-diabetic, and number 2, hypertensive. Almost every single person had above ideal blood pressure. And what you can see here, and by the way, our numbers as far as compliance the first year were really bad. And we've learned a little bit better how to help people be a little bit more compliant. Also, the second year, we're really telling people that the first 10 days, they should really, and I'll explain this in the second topic real quick. I'll explain to you that especially at first, some people really need to be on a low glycemic diet because some people stop eating meat, cheese, all these animal products, and they just end up eating more potatoes and bread. And what happens is that their triglycerides go up. So we see that in the immediate term, we see people's triglycerides go up. So we changed our program a little bit to emphasize low glycemic, whole food, plant-based diet, and now we see excellent results. Really, really good results. Yes?
The elderly population is meat and potatoes.
Yes.
or meat and bread.
Yeah. So if you give them, no meat, they're going to eat all the bread and all the potatoes. And they're not metabolically healthy enough to be able to deal with so many carbs at first. So my boss called Dr. McDougall. Do you all know of who knows John McDougall? She called him. I don't know how she called him. And she's like, hey, we get a lot of people whose triglycerides go up. And he's like, well, if you wait 6 months, they're going to come down. Well, we don't have them for 6 months. We only have them for 2 weeks. So that's why we give them a low glycemic. And I'll explain to you a little bit more about that. But I just want to give you our first year results. The best results we've had in the first year were LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol, this is just the average, including people whose LDLs didn't even change. But I've seen cases of people whose LDL cholesterol went down 40, 50, even 60% in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I've had people start the program late. Instead of starting, we usually do 3 Sundays in a row. Instead of starting the first Sunday, they start the second Sunday, so they only have 7 days. And they change the diet. 7 days, and they come back, their LDL went down 20% in 7 days. We've had people whose glucose, so let me just give you one example. One lady who's actually a church member, first day she shows up, I know she's diabetic. She's had diabetes for 20 years. Her fasting glucose was 189. She did the program. The third Sunday, so 2 weeks later, we tested her glucose was 71. In 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She's no longer diabetic. So this is the kind of results we see, okay? And especially the second year when we changed to low glycemic. But even the first year when we were first learning how to do this, we still had pretty remarkable results. So I just wanted to let you know that. I see this. Nobody has to tell me. I see it with our own participants. So let me show you real quick. I'm going to go to the second presentation here. By the way, the third presentation will be tomorrow. So I hope to see you all here at 10:30. I hope you can come, because I will be giving the last presentation. But part 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about the diet. We already went through this. This is meant to be more of a review. It is reversible. We already talked about the main reason for insulin resistance, which is the fat. I told you I was going to give you a little bit of more of an anatomically correct picture. Here it is. That's what skeletal muscle cells look like. They're not these round things. They're actually very long. Did you know that skeletal muscle cells are long? And so you see the little yellow ball outside. That's the adipose tissue. So, what do we call them again? The love handles? Or what did we say? Tires. Love handles, tires, you all know. That's the yellow balls. But you see the little yellow balls inside. That's the intramyocellular, what? Lipids or fat. Here's another one. Top picture, normal skeletal muscle. Bottom picture, what do you notice the difference? Mucho fat, yes? All that yellow stuff, both inside and outside. So it's both the adipose tissue, but it's also the lipids inside the cell. And particularly the inside the cell lipids are those that interfere with what? With insulin, all right? But skeletal muscle is not the only place where the fat accumulates. Also, what's the biggest organ? What's the biggest internal organ in your body? Liver. Have you ever seen a big liver, a enlarged liver? One time I saw an enlarged liver. It was like supposedly the liver is up to like here, maybe 2/3 of the way across the abdominal cavity. But I've never seen a liver that goes all the way across the abdominal cavity, literally all the way to the other side of the person's abdominal cavity. It was like this big, literally huge liver. Why? Well, it could be alcohol, right? And alcohol, did you know alcohol, by the way, is a toxin? Because, for a while, 30 years ago when my dad was still alive, I would call him sometimes and ask him, what are you doing, Dad? Oh, I'm drinking my little wine. I'm like, Dad, he had been an Adventist. He had left the church, but he knew. I'm like, Dad, you know wine. Oh, no. My doctor said it's good for my heart. Yes, so is grape juice. That's true. It's true. But back in the 90s, doctors were literally telling people they should drink a cup of wine every night for their heart. Did you know this? Also, doctors in the 30s were telling people that smoking was good for them. Okay? Thankfully, now, medical doctors are more enlightened, and so much research is indicating that alcohol is a toxin for the liver, but also for your brain and for just about every part of your body. And what is the only safe amount of alcohol to consume? Big 0. That's the truth. Luckily, we had it from way before. Yes, we already knew. Anyway, but the fat accumulation in the liver can come from not just alcohol, but what else? Because a lot of people have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and therefore, it's not the alcohol, it's something else. It's the food. So whether it's, donuts. Whether it's the sugar in the donut, whether it's all that white flour in the donut, whether it's all that oil in the donut. Because fatty liver can come from eating too much fat, too much sugar, all right? Both things affect the liver, FYI. So not only can it accumulate in the skeletal muscles, the liver, what other place? I mentioned ectopic fat before. Remember that term? Out of place, where it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in the skeletal muscle. It doesn't belong in the liver. Where else does it not belong to? Where it accumulates. I don't know if I mentioned this. Third place, it was the pancreas. So in the pancreas, the FFA, that's free fatty acids, excessive, if it's acute, if it's only for a little bit, your body will compensate. But when it's chronic, the right-hand side of the slide, when it's chronic high fat, it leads to, down at the bottom, what's the bottom line there? Lipotoxicity. The fat in the pancreas is toxic, literally toxic. It's killing those cells that produce insulin. Literally. So long term, all that fat in your pancreas will make you be insulin dependent for some people. Even with type 2, you can become insulin dependent diabetic. Type 2, because your pancreas eventually, first of all, if it's making all this insulin for years and years and years, just working full time, 3 or 4 times the normal amount for 20 years, what's going to happen at the end? It's just going to give up. It's going to tire out. And second, all that fat is literally toxic to the pancreas. And it's just going to give up. Yes?
Is there any connection between that and pancreatic cancer?
I don't know for sure. It could be. I mean, I don't think there have been enough. So the question is whether there's a connection between pancreatic cancer. There probably can be. I don't know that they've done the studies where they can directly connect those two things. I hope they do. I would have to look up into the research to see if there's studies that connect it directly. But it would make sense, wouldn't it? It's toxic. It's literally toxic. So the 3 types of cells where the fat doesn't belong. Skeletal muscle. What's the number 2? Liver. Number 3? Pancreas. Literally toxic to your pancreas. So how do we solve all of this? Oh, by the way, insulin resistant in the middle. To the left. Those are the autoimmune types of diabetes. Type 1 and type 1.5. Both of those types of diabetes that are autoimmune, by the way, autoimmune, what is that? What's an autoimmune disease? Your body is literally rejecting your whatever tissue, right? So it could be rheumatoid arthritis, so in that case the tissue would be the joints. What other types of autoimmune disease are there? Lupus, so that's the systemic disease. Type 1, what tissue is being rejected or destroyed in this case? The specific cells that make insulin. So the beta cells in your pancreas are the ones that are destroyed. So autoimmune basically means your immune system is attacking the wrong cells because it should not be attacking you. It should be attacking some foreign cell or molecule, and instead it's attacking you. So the immune system is confused, yes? And there's usually an inflammatory response. So along with the autoimmune destruction of certain tissues, there's also an inflammation of tissues. And so there's a lot of different, there's like 20-some autoimmune diseases. Type 1 and 1.5 are just one kind. But there's other types of autoimmune diseases. Now, if anyone here knows someone or you yourself suffer from autoimmune diseases, there are some that could be helped or reversed. Hashimoto's disease, by the way, that's another. Have you heard of Hashimoto? What is it? What part of? The thyroid. So that's another autoimmune disease. It used to be that hypothyroidism's main cause was lack of iodine, but that's no longer the case. That's not the most common cause anymore. The most common cause is an autoimmune reaction in your thyroid. And I've heard of people who have gotten better. There's a doctor online, her name is Brooke Goldner, and she has, some of you are nodding, I think you've heard of her. She has a protocol specifically for autoimmune diseases. She used to have lupus. She no longer has it. And there's another doctor who made a movie called Code Blue, I think. She's a medical doctor as well. She used to have MS. She reversed it. Her own doctor had told her she wouldn't be able to walk anymore when she was first getting the disease. She was basically walking on crutches or even a wheelchair, but she reversed her MS. It's an autoimmune disease. She reversed it and she ran a marathon after that. Her doctor couldn't believe it. Anyway, I'm just doing this little parenthesis to let you know that some autoimmune diseases can be reversed. Lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and others. Hashimoto's. All right, so that's the left side. The right side, there's prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. Those are directly caused by insulin resistance. So yes, those can be reversed in many cases. Now, if you're a type 2 person whose pancreas has already been damaged, either by decades of overproducing insulin or by lipotoxicity, you might not be able to reverse it 100%. That's why the reversal rate is about 85 to 90%. Most people can reverse it, but not 100%. And then there's gestational diabetes, which is very much related to insulin resistance. And then there's polycystic ovarian syndrome. Anybody ever heard of that? PCOS, reversible in many, many cases. So that's also related to insulin resistance. See how many things are connected here? I just wanted to point that out. But anyway, here's another huge, this one is not even, you can't even read it. There's so many things. But I'm just going to mention some of the ones that we haven't mentioned. There's cancer, coronary artery disease, hypertension, atherosclerosis, obesity, high cholesterol, fatty liver, PCOS, Alzheimer's, neuropathy, blindness, kidney failure, retinopathy, erectile dysfunction. By the way, erectile dysfunction is sometimes the first cue that there's heart disease. Did you know? Many men have no idea that erectile dysfunction can be related to lifestyle. It definitely is, and it could be reversed. We mentioned the liver. There's inflammatory cytokines. These are molecules produced by the immune system when there is inflammation. And insulin-resistant liver is an inflamed liver where these cytokines are being produced. So your body now has inflammation, and these cytokines all over the place. There's oxidation, accumulation of fat, and of course, increased glucose production. The point of this slide is this is a multi-site issue. Therefore, it requires a multimodal intervention. What does that mean? That means we need to add several things. You're not going to get this silver bullet, this magic pill to solve all the metabolic problems going on. It needs to be a multimodal, meaning you add several aspects of lifestyle. And I will only have time to cover two, which are the most important: the diet and the physical activity. But honestly, our program goes way beyond. We talk about sleep, how sleep affects diabetes, how sleep affects appetite hormones that are now everybody's taking this medication. Have you ever heard of Ozempic, Wegovy, all these medications that people are losing like all kinds of weight with it? It's a very expensive medication. It's called Ozempic. Everybody wants to take it. It basically works on your hormones, on your appetite hormones. But you can do things with lifestyle to do the same results for a lot less money. We talk about sleep. We talk about fasting, intermittent fasting, which is, it works wonders for diabetes. Really, honestly, wonders for autoimmune diseases, for inflammatory diseases. So we talk about lifestyle in general. So let me just say that even though I'm only going to cover nutrition and exercise, there's so much more that could be done. It's really a lifestyle. It includes everything. It includes what times you go to bed. It includes what time you eat. Honestly, it's multimodal because it's a complex problem, because it's caused by many things, not just one thing. Does that make sense? All right. So let me just, already talked about the pancreas. We already talked about this in this. So now we're going to go into key number uno. Número uno. What's number one? What's number one tool in your toolbox to address metabolic diseases? Not just diabetes. Oh, yes. What you put in your mouth. Why? Because it's what we do the most. Yes or no? Yes, it's what we do the most. 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. Yes or no? Yes. So we're going to talk about diet. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about which types of exercise are best for diabetes and for anyone who wants to prevent diabetes. Okay? We're going to talk about that tomorrow. What's the best type of exercise for improving body composition, all that. But right now, before we leave, I just want to mention the nutrition aspect. This is incredibly important. And what I want to say is this. No matter what you have heard, there's many ways to lose weight. Therefore, there's many ways to control diabetes. You can chop your stomach out, literally. Bariatric surgery, by the way. Our medical director is a board-certified obesity doctor. And she goes to all these conferences, obesity conferences. And she told me one day we were talking about this, she's just horrified, literally horrified, that in these conferences, they're promoting bariatric surgery for children. Because it's like the only medical solution that can work long-term to address the problem of obesity. What? We're literally chopping people's stomach out this is an irreversible surgery. Lifelong consequences. It literally has a lot of really bad side effects, to say the least. All right? But it's not the only solution, you guys. It's not the only solution. Wegovy, this newer drugs, which, by the way, these drugs, they're very famous. Ozempic and Wegovy right now. These are the medications that work on your hormones. One of the side effects is that they literally slow down your digestion. For some people, they slow it down so much, it stops. So the food just sits there for hours, it starts to rot, and some people get pancreatitis. All medications have side effects. There's no such a thing as a medication without side effects, because all medications are drugs, are chemicals. There's impossible to make a chemical that wouldn't have a side effect. How can it not have a side effect? It doesn't belong in your body. Nobody has diabetes because of metformin, lack of metformin. It doesn't belong in your body. It helps. But the ideal thing is to put your body in harmony with the intended design. Doesn't that make more sense? So the only type of diet that has been found not only to prevent and reverse diabetes is the only diet that helps with everything else that comes with it. the hypertension, the Alzheimer's, the cancer, the heart disease. Whoops, see how I get so excited. I start throwing things around. See what happens? The only diet that works with everything. It sounds simplistic. Right? Like people come to me and ask me, well, what can I do for a whole food plant-based diet? But what can I do for a whole food plant-based diet? But what about a whole food? It's like the same answer. Why is it the same answer? Because it's the original diet. Genesis 1:29 is the original design by the main creator and engineer of this body. Right? He knows best. Exactly. The Bible is your user manual right there on the first page. It says how to take care of it. Just like when you buy a new car. Has anybody bought a new car? Open the glove compartment. There's the manual. So you're like, oh, this truck, should I put diesel or gas? What if you put the wrong fuel? You can ruin the engine. What if we put the wrong fuel here? Can we ruin it? Yes, of course. So where do we look up how to take care of it? Right there, owner's manual, first page, honestly, first page, Genesis 1:29. Most Bibles, it's the first page, unless it's large print. Maybe it's the second. Honestly, right? I'm just saying, you guys. Okay, so that's why for me it's no surprise that finally science is realizing what we all knew for many years ago. Here almost everybody is Seventh-day Adventist. We've known this pretty much forever, since the beginning of this church. Because it's in the Bible. It should be no surprise. But anyway, now doctors call it, the medicine's biggest secret. It's not a secret. It's right there in the Bible. Anyway, what's a whole food plant-based diet? The first part is whole food. What's that mean? Not processed. So I was saying Oreos are vegan. People are like, ooh, that means I could eat Oreos. Well, there's one little problem. Everything here is, by definition, what? Processed. What's processed mean? It means it's gone through a plant, but not the plant that grows on the ground. It's literally a plant built by man where they process things. So anything that has white flour, oil, sugar, chemicals, excess salt. I was reading one time a book on this subject. So I read a lot of these books on this subject. And this one lady was talking about foods, right? Like processed foods, blah, blah, blah. And then she was just mentioning how most processed foods have a long list of ingredients. And she mentioned something called Lunchables. Anybody here know that word? Lunchable. What is Lunchable? The girl's like, yummy. Lunchables. You guys know what it is, right? Little boxes. And so I had never myself really opened one before. And she's like, Lunchables have like 50 some ingredients. I'm like, 50 ingredients? That's too much. So I'm like, really? So I went to Target one time, and there they had Lunchables. So I pick one up, and I start counting. First of all, I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? Literally, those letters are like made for you not to read them, I think. So, but eventually I focused. I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 17. I just counted the cheese ingredients because honestly I was getting tired. Because there's cheese, there's crackers, there's little ham or turkey or whatever. I just counted the cheese. How many ingredients do you think were in cheese? How many ingredients should be in cheese? Like, what's cheese? Milk? Salt? Some kind of coagulant? I don't know. Rennet? There's 17 in just the cheese. Why does cheese have 17 ingredients? Why? And that's just a portion of all. I mean, the rest, that was just 1/3 of the list. Why are they putting so much stuff? Literally, if you read these books on, processed foods and stuff, some of these guys, whether they're journalists or writers or nutritionists, they go to some of these plants where they're making the food. Literally, the food without all this stuff they add would taste like cardboard. It has no taste. The food has been overprocessed, right, so that it can last long. Because when you go to It's not Safeway here. What is it? Stater Brothers. Okay, you go to Stater Brothers, you pull out a box of cookies. Do you think those cookies were made yesterday? Last week? No. They were probably made months ago, 2 months ago. They have to last a long time in the shelf. They have to be shelf stable. So they put a bunch of stuff. Also, the texture, the mouthfeel, the color, and honestly, the combination of the 3 main ingredients that make the food attractive. What are those 3 main ingredients? Salt, sugar, and fat. So there's people who go to college for 4 years, study food science, right? It's a career. You can go and become a food scientist. Most of these people, when they graduate, they go to work for the food industry. And what they do all day is try to figure out how to make the food more appealing, because they already produce 3,600 calories per person per day in North America, in the United States. How many of you need 3,600 calories a day? Not me. And I'm not eating 3,600 calories a day. Somebody else is eating mine. Somebody else is eating yours probably. And they're still trying to increase sales because that's what Wall Street says they have to do. See how it's all a system. It's all a system. You can't change it. I mean, we would literally have to get rid of Wall Street to change the system. The system says you have to increase sales quarter by quarter. How are they going to increase sales if they're already making too much? So they have to make the food more, well, they don't use bad words. They use good words like palatable, attractive, delicious. Really, what they're trying to do is make it so when you open that bag of Doritos or crackers or Oreo cookies, you eat the first one and you go, I can't just have one. I'm going to have 2, 3, half the package, the whole package. You see what's going on here? They're making the food literally addictive on purpose, but not because there's a economic reason for doing it. There's a financial desire to make this happen because otherwise they lose their job. It's their fiduciary obligation to increase sales. So they have to. So that's why the food is the way it is. That's why chocolate cake is so yummy, you guys. It is. Chocolate it has like 4 or 5 ingredients. I could talk about this all day because I have a whole presentation on food addiction. And I sadly have to say what chocolate has. And I actually asked for permission. Do you guys want to know? And people are like, yes, tell us. And I have to say what chocolate has that makes it so addictive. But it is literally addictive. The other thing that's very addictive? Caffeine, yes, of course. What else? What is that thing on pizza? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's addictive. I'm sorry to say, I don't want to offend anybody. Please do not be offended. It just is. That's why it's the hardest thing to give up. So all these things are like it for a reason. That's what I'm saying. Now, how do you know if something is highly processed? Number 1, it has very little fiber. Now, that's the other thing missing from the second. So we said whole food, that's the first part. The second part is plant-based. What does that mean? What's plant-based? Coming from what kinds of food? So basically plant life, right? So plants, things that grow from the ground. So if it has a face, some people say if it has a face, yeah, but what about eggs? They don't have a face. Well, then if it has a mother, then it's not a plant. It's something that grows from the ground, yes? That's what plants are, by definition. Anyway, the thing that's mostly lacking in these 2 categories, processed foods, and what's the second category? So this is the first thing we try to lower the amount, hopefully eliminate. The second category is animal foods. What's lacking in these 2 groups, you guys? Fiber. Now, here's the thing about fiber. It used to be thought fiber, it's just that extra stuff, roughage. Oh, no, 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 no. Now we understand, wait a minute, fiber is like super important. It's probably one of the most important things we eat every day, honestly. Because, see, it used to be thought that it's just roughage because it doesn't get digested. Did you know this? So the fiber is not digested. So it goes through your stomach, nothing happens. It goes through your small intestine, nothing happens. And it goes through your bowel, and you think, well, nothing happens there either. So it gets, it goes out the body, basically. But something does happen. Where? The large intestine. Now, wow, it's like our eyes are being opened about this reality. In the large intestine, there happens to be a community of little beings. What am I talking about? The microbiome. Have you ever heard of this word? Because 50 years ago, people hadn't heard of the word microbiome. Now it's like the big thing. The microbiome is basically your good gut bacteria, yes? It turns out we have 10 times more bacteria than human cells. We're 10 times more bacteria. Of course, they're small, right? So they're like 3 pounds. So you think you don't have them, but yes, they're there. They're mostly in your gut, although they're also in your other parts of your body, like your skin, but mostly in your gut. Here's the thing, you guys. This is so important because the gut bacteria helps in a lot of ways. So when the fiber gets into your gut, the fiber is not digested by you. It's digested or eaten or processed or fermented by the bacteria. They need it, and this bacteria is good for you. We need it because when we don't have the right kind, then we start seeing the negative consequences of a bad bacteria in our gut. I mean, there's many consequences, not only in the digestive system, but everywhere. But here's the thing. The gut bacteria eat fiber, okay? When we eat a low-fiber diet, so too much of this is no fiber at all. So when the American diet is 60 or 87% these two things. 87%. So most Americans eat, the average is like 15 grams of fiber. The recommendation is 35. Ideally, in my opinion, we should eat 50 grams. Some people in some indigenous communities in South America eat 100 grams. So we're way below what we need. Most of us are fiber deficient. Here's what happens. When your gut bacteria is not getting enough food, what is it doing? Where is it getting the food from? You. Specifically, the mucus layer in your gut is also made of carbohydrates. Not fiber, it's a different kind of carbohydrate, but that's also carbohydrate. So what does the little bacteria do when they're not getting enough food from your diet? They start eating that mucus layer in your gut. That mucus layer is protection of your gut. So now they start eating it away. And what happens then when they eat all that mucus layer that protects the lining of your gut? Then you start seeing gaps in that layer. Leaky gut. Have you ever heard of leaky gut? Well, what happens is now, instead of that barrier being like this and only absorbing like water, because honestly in the gut, in that large bowel, only water should be absorbed, mostly. Everything else happens in the small intestine. So instead of just getting water through, now you have these gaps in your gut and are letting more things go through. And now you're absorbing other molecules, such as toxins, such as other proteins maybe, that don't belong. Now your body is seeing all these foreign things that shouldn't be in your blood. Now they're there, and your body's like, whoa, there's a lot of invaders here. So what system in your body is in charge of protecting you from invaders? The immune system. So your immune system is triggered. So now you have an inflammatory condition, autoimmune condition. Your body gets all out of whack from lack of fiber. See how important fiber is? We thought it's just, roughage, who cares? No, you should care. We all should care. We're probably all fiber deficient. That's why a whole food plant-based diet works so well. Because it emphasizes not just vegan. People eat vegan diets that are mostly junk. Did you know there's such a thing as junk food vegans? Yes, there are many people who are junk food vegans. I don't even call it a vegan diet because it doesn't emphasize the right aspect. Now, there's obviously good things about a vegan diet, but it's not emphasizing the main point, which is it needs to be whole. It needs to be unprocessed for it to be healthy. That's why Oreo cookies are not that healthy, because they're processed, there's no fiber in them. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just what you're leaving out. It's what are you eating? Your food shouldn't be defined by what you don't eat. It should be defined by what you do eat. Does that make sense? That's why a whole food plant-based diet is so wonderful for reversing just about everything. Really, I'm not exaggerating. Now, I'm not going to promise you that you're going to reverse whatever you have because there's all kinds of other factors. Like I said, it's a lifestyle. Are you sleeping enough? Because if you're not sleeping, you could be eating perfect, and yet you still could have a disease. You see what I'm saying? Are you, getting exercise? Are you breathing fresh air? All these different things. But when it comes to diet, a whole food plant-based diet reverses diabetes. Now, if you go to a dietitian, they're probably going to give you the ADA protocol, which is not so bad if you compare this model, the plate model that tells you half your food should be vegetables. I mean, compare that to a plate of pizza. Hey, it's not that bad. It's actually pretty good. So they tell you half your food should be vegetables, and then you're going to eat some proteins, which are going to be lean proteins, right? So they tell you eat chicken, eat fish, but now watch all the Netflix documentaries, and you're going to go like, oh, forget about fish and chicken. Just watch that documentary, The Twin Experiment. Anyway, also, it's based on portion control, okay? This is what the ADA protocol is based on. This is how much carbohydrates, the meat. I mean, they teach you all of this if you go to dietitian school. The carbs are this much, and, all of this is portion control. And in fact, I've seen some of these posters, like I work for WIC. Do you all know what WIC is? It's an agency that helps women and children. And so we have some of these posters, so they tell you, it's okay to eat everything, just less, right? Just eat a little bit of everything. Moderation. Have you heard this? Everything moderately. This one is one of my favorites. This is literally, it was at WIC. They had this poster at WIC. Portion distortion. Basically telling you, as long as you eat half the burger, you'll be fine. Right? Just eat less. Eat half of what you would eat. Do you see a little problem with this approach? Anybody? What could be the issue if you're only eating half of the food? You might still be hungry. If you only fill up half of your stomach, all day long you're going to be like, when can I have my next meal? You're going to be hungry. You're not going to be filling your stomach. Now, there's a concept that I want to introduce to you real quick, and it's the concept of calorie density. And here's why a whole food plant-based diet works so much better. Because if you fill your stomach with only 500 calories, depending on the food, there'll be different amounts of food in your stomach. So if you only take in 500 calories of oil, which oil, by the way, is the food with the highest calorie density in all of the human diet. So people all the time are asking me, well, what about oil? What if I use coconut oil? What if I use olive oil? I'm like, all oils have 120 calories per tablespoon, no matter what. It could be gold oil for all I care. It doesn't matter. It really is all the same. It's all pure fat. So you're putting pure fat in your food. Do you want that? I mean, I'm just saying. It's all very calorie dense. So 500 calories of oil uses up very little of your stomach, right? What if you eat cheese instead? Okay, 500 calories of cheese is literally just a little bit more, not that much. So if you only eat 500 calories of cheese, you're going to be hungry. You're going to be hungry because it's very little amount of food. The volume is small. But what if you eat meat? Well, it's barely a little bit more. Only a third of your stomach might be full. What if you eat then potatoes, beans, and rice? Well, now we're talking, because now we're putting fiber. Do you see the difference? Now, these are higher in calories than vegetables, but they still have fiber. So now you're filling up your stomach more than half. If you eat 500 calories of nothing but vegetables and fruits, it's going to fill the whole thing up. Now, most of us don't eat nothing but one thing. We eat a mixture of things. Like me, today for lunch, I had a lot of veggies. I had yummy salad. Whoever made the salad, thank you, it was really good. I had the potatoes I mentioned. I had some beans. So I had a mixture. I'm full. I'm still good. I'm not. You guys, I don't know, but I'm still full. Because I had a good mixture of everything. I filled up my stomach. I feel very satisfied. But that fiber has volume. You see the difference here? Fiber creates volume. Also, vegetables happen to be very low in calorie density. Vegetables are the one food category that's at the exact opposite end of the scale compared to oil. So oil, about 4,000 calories per pound. 4,000. Vegetables, 200. They're the lowest in calorie density. You're not going to eat all vegetables, but the more you eat, the more you can eat. Does that make sense? You can eat more. The whole food plant-based diet is not about portion control, eating little, tiny little bit. No. Eat more. Eat a lot. Eat all you can. Does that make sense? It's a different message. All right. So, keto diet. Somebody asked about the keto diet. I have a video in Spanish on this, and it's on my YouTube channel, and it's the video that has the most thumbs down in my YouTube channel. People hate that video. Some people hate my video on the keto diet because I say, basically, the topic of the video is why I think the keto diet is the worst for diabetes. Why do you think the keto diet is not the best? Well, first of all, you can just look at the pyramid. What's at the bottom of the pyramid? Well, in the keto diet, unfortunately, it's not vegetables. The bottom of the keto diet is fat. By definition, a keto diet is 60 to 80% fat. It's a high-fat diet. Why? Because you're trying to cut down on the carbohydrates. So here's the thing about the keto diet. As long as you stay on it, since you're eating only 50 grams of carbohydrates, nothing, very little carbohydrates, you have nothing to make that glucose out of. Does that make sense? Nothing is converted to glucose because you're not eating carbs. So you go check your glucose, it's not there. So you check your glucose, it's 70. You check your A1C. People's A1C, do you know what A1C is? A1C is the 3-month average of glucose in the blood, basically. When you take your blood glucose in the moment, it's just for the day. It's just a screenshot of what you have in the day. But when you take the A1C, it's kind of like the average. And you want to be in the 5% range. People with diabetes, 6.5% and above, that's diabetes. I know people who have 8%, 10%, 14%. Really bad diabetes. People will go on a keto diet. Do you want to know how low they go? 4%. And they're like, this is the best diet in the world. Completely reverses diabetes. As long as you stay on it. Most people drop out by 6 months because who can stay on it? It's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to stay on it because your body is not made for it. It's not designed for it. So what happens when you're not eating carbohydrates? You no longer have the glucose. Glucose is the main fuel for the brain, by the way. It uses 25% of your glucose. The brain. So now that your brain is not being fed in the rest of your cells, what then? Well, your body goes into emergency mode and it starts to make ketones out of the fat. So when people were hungry years ago, 100, 500, 1,000 years ago, and if you had a drought, if you had an earthquake or a war, people would literally starve. When you're starving, your body goes into emergency mode and it starts using your fat to keep you alive. That's why ketones exist. But God made them as a way to keep you alive in emergencies. Does that make sense? That's why ketones are there. But now the ketone diet is used to kind of trigger this reserve, let's say, of fat, but by eating fat. That's what they do. The keto diet was invented in the 1920s or 30s because they found that some children who had epilepsy did not respond to any medication. And they tried a keto, they didn't try the keto diet. First, they tried fasting. Because when you do fasting, you're no longer producing the glucose to feed the brain. And they found that some kids responded to that positively. So some kind of metabolism in the brain was responding to that. But it's really hard to fast children. So then they created the keto diet to use instead of fasting. The point is that the original keto diet is fasting. Does that make sense to you? The original keto diet is actually fasting. The keto diet was made to replace or imitate the fasting, the benefits of fasting. That's why. But anyway, as long as you stay on it, you have no glucose, your glucose comes down. The minute you eat a piece of bread, an apple, anything that has carbohydrates, what do you think happens to your glucose? It spikes way worse than ever before because all of the fat that you have been consuming on the keto diet, what has it been doing to your metabolism? It's been making you more insulin resistant. All this time you stay on the keto diet, you're becoming more and more and more insulin resistant. It's covered up by the fact that you're not eating any glucose, any carbs, so you don't realize until you get off of it. And all of a sudden you're completely intolerant of carbohydrates. You can't even handle them anymore. Does that make sense? That's why I think it's the worst diet. It doesn't cure diabetes. It doesn't reverse diabetes. It only covers it up. Does that make sense?
So how does a person get off of it?
They would have to hopefully go on a whole food plant-based diet and try to reverse the insulin resistance that they created by eating all the keto diet, the too much fat. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is a study done by Dr. Neil Barnard. He put a group of diabetics on two diets. So he basically took a group, divided them up into two groups. One group was given the ADA diet. What's the ADA again? American Diabetes Association. It's not a bad diet, all right? It's not too bad. The other group was given a whole food plant-based diet. The only difference, really, the only difference is the proteins. Because in the ADA diet, the protein is lean protein coming from chicken, fish, mostly. The whole food plant-based diet, where does the protein come from? Beans, tofu, that kind of thing. The only other slight difference is that the ADA does not say you have to eat all whole grains. They allowed some white flour, but not a lot. They say half of your whole grains should be whole, but it's a slight difference. It's better, obviously, the whole food plant-based diet. But that was a difference. 12 weeks. Which group do you think did better? Well, I think you already kind of think. You already kind of know. I'm just going to give you the results. 12 weeks. After 12 weeks, the whole food plant-based diet lost more weight, lowered their A1C more. So that's, again, the glucose for 3 months. They lowered them more. And here's the key difference. Without what? Without portion control, which is the main feature of the ADA diet. So there you have, now I'm giving you a choice. Which one would you rather have? I mean, it's up to you, honestly. So you want to just control, because basically people on the ADA diet do okay. They don't reverse their diabetes, but they better control their glucose levels. And they might still have to take the medication. Whereas people on the whole food plant-based diet, they'll probably reverse the diabetes, no portion control mostly, and maybe at the beginning, because people are not metabolically healthy at first. So maybe at the beginning. But there's more freedom, honestly, to eat more foods eventually, and no medication maybe associated with that. So Anyway, I just wanted to give you that. Now, this has been confirmed in many studies. I just wanted to show you all the studies where they've shown. For instance, this one showed a drop of A1C from 8.1 to 5.8 in A1C. So from diabetic to non-diabetic, because below 6.5%, it's non-diabetic. So that's what some of these studies have shown. Now, this study, I wanted to emphasize, what we're looking at here is kidney function. What did I say? Kidney function. So you see the red lines going down. Do you see the red lines going down? That means kidney function in all these diabetic individuals is going down. Now, you probably heard of people with diabetes who end up with kidney failure, maybe? Have you ever heard of anybody? People sometimes end up with dialysis because of the diabetes. Okay, well, that's what's happening here. Their kidney failures or the kidney function is going down until they hit that arrow. Do you see the arrow at the top? Little arrow? And now the color changes to green. Do you see that? That indicates change of diet to a whole food plant-based diet. What starts to happen after the change? What do you see before and after? What do you see? That's the difference between the red lines and the green lines. They're no longer going down. You see the difference there? The kidney function stops going down after they change to a whole food plant-based diet. I think this is very important to know because a high protein diet is actually damaging for the kidneys. A lot of people end up with kidney damage. All that protein in meat and animal products needs to be filtered through the kidneys. So just so you know. A lifestyle intervention usually means a whole food plant-based diet, minimally processed grains, high fiber. The lentils and the beans not only have good vegetable protein, they are the highest source of fiber, by the way, in the human diet, the lentils. That's why a lot of people eat beans and they have a little side effect. Do you know what I'm talking about? It has a technical name, by the way. It's called flatulence. You know what I'm saying? Gas production. Because their gut bacteria, by the way, is just not used to that amount of fiber. So you have to slowly, give it time, and then it will adjust. That's what happens. But not only does it have fiber, there's something called resistant starch. Have you ever heard of resistant starch? Resistant starch is a starch. It's not even a fiber, technically. It's a starch. But it's not digested, so it also functions as fiber. Beans have it, potatoes have it, but only if you let them cool down. Same thing with rice. If you let the rice and the beans cool down, some of those starches become resistant starch, and they're actually better for you after you've cooled them down and then reheated them. Did you know that? Anyway, that's a topic for another day. But this is basically some of the things that we recommend people eat on a whole food plant-based diet. Low saturated fat, it's okay to eat spices, low glycemic load, especially at the beginning. Because if we have people for only a short amount of time, we want to emphasize low glycemic so that they can see better results. Low sodium. Here's another way to look at it. I mean, these are just some of the charts that you can see. By the way, this was done in Loma Linda. I just want to point out that Loma Linda has done several Adventist studies. You know about the Adventist health studies, number 1, number 2. This is from number 2. In the health study number 2, they compared Adventists to other Adventists, as opposed to previous studies where they compared Adventists to non-Adventists. They found Adventists live 10 years longer. You probably heard of this before. In number 2, they compared Adventists to other Adventists. They found out, or they stratified people into 5 categories of diet, from non-vegetarian, people who eat just a normal diet, semi-vegetarian, people who eat meat maybe twice a week, to the pesco-vegetarian. What's a pesco-vegetarian? Fish only. The lacto-ovo-vegetarian, what is that? They still dairy and eggs. And then the last one is the vegan, which by definition is no animal products. I just want you to note the 3 things on the chart. First of all, the only group that had normal BMI. What's normal BMI? Normal BMI is 25. So BMI is a measure of weight and height. So if you want a normal weight, you technically have to be below 25. There's only one group that qualifies as normal BMI in Adventists, and it's the vegan group. The second thing I want to just mention real quick, if you take non-vegetarians as the reference point, you're going to see a decrease both in risk of hypertension and diabetes the lower in the animal amount of food in the diet you go. So in other words, when you go from non-vegetarian to semi-vegetarian, let's take diabetes. From 1 to 0.72, that's a 28% decrease in risk of diabetes just going to semi-vegetarian. Does that make sense? And then if you go from there to pesco-vegetarian, that's a 51% drop. If you go to lacto-ovo-vegetarian, that's a 61% drop. And if you go to vegan, that's a 78? 78%. Do you see the difference here? That's the more you lower the amount of animal foods in the diet, the more the risk goes down. Same thing with the hypertension. So this is not a keto diet. This is what you would eat on a keto diet. That's not what we recommend. We don't recommend low carbs, high fat. Because this is what the research says that dietary fat can do. The title alone. Dietary fat acutely increases what? Glucose concentrations in the blood and insulin requirements of patients with type 1. So the more fat you eat, the more glucose you have, the more insulin you need. We do not recommend a high-fat diet. We recommend a whole food, plant-based diet, high fiber, low fat. That's what we recommend. That's what we have seen has the best result. We recommend eat in balance still, like try to eat a lot of veggies, a lot of fruit. This is Dr. McDougall's study on hypertension. 7 days. And I want to show you the baseline, systolic and diastolic. Do you see baseline? 150 over 94. That's at the beginning of the study. At the end of the 7 days, it had gone down to 136 over 83. In 7 days, you can see that kind of drop in blood pressure with a whole food plant-based diet. I definitely recommend this kind of carbohydrate sources. By the way, Weimar, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Joel Furman, all of these diets are over 70% carbs. And you can reverse diabetes with over 70% carbs. How is that possible? How is it possible to reverse diabetes eating 70% carbs? Is the fiber. So there's a hierarchy of whole grains. I recommend more intact grains with people who have already diabetes. So that means less flour products, more intact, like the quinoa, like the wheat berries. Do you know what wheat berries are? The whole, like the actual wheat, you soak it overnight, put it in an Instant Pot for like half an hour, and then you have the wheat berries, and you can eat the wheat entire. The reason why is because all of these grains, do you see here on the left side of the picture, there's a wall. There's literally a cell wall in the grain cells, and that's the fiber. When it's made into flour, that cell wall is broken up. But when it's still intact, that wall is still there. So you're not absorbing as much of it as if when it's a flour product. We recommend intact grains for most people. Also GI, low GI, so basically foods that don't elevate your blood sugar so much until you're metabolically healthy enough to handle things such as, I don't know, a banana, might be a higher GI, glycemic index. Mango, certain fruits might elevate some people's blood sugar, so we tell people, stay out of them for at least, a few weeks until you're able to handle them. The fiber is really important. Some studies have shown that fiber lowers glucose, lowers lipids. With the protein, a lot of people are very concerned about the protein. It turns out plants contain all essential amino acids. There's no amino acids missing in plants. All of them are there. You're never going to be protein deficient unless you're eating nothing but white bread and Coca-Cola. Then you might be protein deficiency. Okay? But other than that, if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, especially with a lot of legumes, you're going to eat all the protein you need. And in fact, did you have a question?
You have to combine certain things.
Do you have to combine? No, because we found that as long as you eat variety throughout the day, you don't have to combine them in every meal. The daily variety is what matters. And in fact, excess protein can be, as I said before, difficult for your kidneys, but also excess protein causes acidity in your body, which means you have to leach calcium to neutralize that acid, means you lose calcium in the urine. So people who eat too much protein, they lose a lot of calcium, and that can lead to osteoporosis. So legumes versus poultry and meat, you see the differences there. I don't have to go over it too much because you already know the differences in health characteristics. Legumes are basically a better source of protein. You can take a picture if you want, but basically legumes are a better source of protein. In my opinion, I can go into details if you have questions. And I do recommend a small amount of fat for everybody every day, but not a whole pound of peanuts while you're watching TV. That's not what I mean by a small amount. A small amount is literally 1 ounce, which is for most people 1 handful. Avocados, maybe a little bit more, like 2 ounces. You're probably okay. Maybe half of a small avocado. Not 5 avocados a day. Just FYI. But you do need a little bit of fat every day. I'll tell you why. Because if you're eating that salad, there's a lot of beta carotene, in the greens, and there's a lot of fat-soluble vitamins. If you eat that salad without any nuts or any avocado or any fat at all, you're not going to absorb all those fat-soluble vitamins. Add just a little bit of fat, not a lot. You don't need 3 avocados. You need just a tiny little bit. And then you'll absorb all those fat-soluble vitamins. Flax and chia we recommend for everyone because they have what kind of fat? Omega-3. Yes, omega-3 fatty acids. Most of us are not getting enough. Maybe people back in the day did, but we eat way too much oil that has excessive omega-6. When you're eating excessive omega-6 fatty acids, which come from poultry and egg also, by the way, excessive omega-6 fatty acids basically block your body from converting into the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. We're not basically getting enough of omega-3 fatty acids. So I recommend people eat chia and flax every day and grind it up so that you can absorb these omega-3 fatty acids. There's other sources, but these are the best sources, more concentrated. There's also hemp. You all know what hemp seeds are a good source. So are walnuts and soy and green vegetables, but these are the most concentrated. I definitely recommend it. In variety, as you can see, all the different nuts and seeds have different nutrients, so the more variety, the better. We recommend variety. My husband eats 1 grain for breakfast, and that is oats. And I tell him, how about eat quinoa once in a while? But he only eats oats. I don't know how many of you only eat one thing, but variety is highly recommended because of this, because of the variety. Say that again? Oh, really? Oats? The same thing every day. That's a good point. That's a good way to put it. I'm going to try to use that now. Okay, I'm going to finish with this. Can diabetics eat fruit? Yes. What do you think? Yes? It has what? It has fiber. Yes, you guys are so well educated. I'm just speaking to the choir. Well, I'm just going to give you some more information, okay? Here's a study where they took some diabetics, divided them into 2, and told one group only eat 2 fruits a day or less, up to 2, so 2 or less. The other group of diabetics, these are all diabetics, the other group, they said, eat at least 2, but eat more if you can. After 2 weeks, which one do you think was doing better? The fruit limited or no limit? Actually, they were both doing the same. There was no benefit in restricting fruit. That's the bottom line of this study. No benefit of restricting fruit. They were both doing the same. No benefit in glucose levels. No benefit. So the conclusion, if you can't read it, but the conclusion there, red underline, the researchers said, don't limit their fruit. Don't limit it. It doesn't have any benefit. Here's another study. I don't know if you can read that from the top, but it says strawberries and apples were studied. For this particular study, it was strawberries and apples. And what they found is when you eat strawberries or apples or both, not only do you not get a spike in blood sugar, it actually blocks that glucose in your gut from being absorbed into your bloodstream. Maybe the fiber, but other components. You see how it says at the top, it says polyphenols and phenolic acid? So there's nutrients in fruit that prevent your blood sugar from spiking. Isn't that interesting? Third study, and I'm going to finish with this, I promise. The third study, they took a bunch of people, they gave them a slice of bread, they measured how much the blood sugar went up with a slice of bread, and then they gave them a slice of bread and a bunch of berries that were made into a smoothie. So which one do you think would make the blood sugar go up more? The bread alone or bread with the berry smoothie? You would think, because the berries have sugar, right? You would think that the bread plus the smoothie would make the blood sugar go up more. That's what you would have think conventionally. But what they found is that the bread alone makes the blood sugar go up more. There's something in the berries that's preventing the blood sugar from going up as much. Something in the berries is blocking the glucose from going up as high. So can't diabetics eat fruit? Yes. What about fruit juice? No. What's lacking? Yes, so what they found is that whole fruit reduces the risk of diabetes, but fruit juice increases the risk of diabetes. I don't have to tell you about soft drinks, right? I don't have to tell you about soda. I don't have to tell you about Monsters or whatever. I don't even know what they're called anymore. I don't have to tell you about that, right? And I don't have to tell you about alcohol. I don't have to tell you, right? Alcohol is a toxic. Okay, so I tried to give you everything very condensed about the diet. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around a little bit longer. Come up to me, come up to the front, because I'm going to pray and end the meeting. But if you do have questions, feel free to ask. In fact, if you guys want to, stick around and hear the answers, I'm more than willing to answer them in front of everybody. But I just wanted to let you know that I will answer questions. I'm totally free to do that right now. Tomorrow, we'll have more time. I will just do one presentation, and then we'll have free time for Q&A. If you have any question, it doesn't even have to be about diabetes, pre-diabetes, or insulin resistance. It could be about literally anything that has to do with nutrition or with natural, remedies, because that's my other area of expertise. So I will try to answer all your questions, but you have to be here. I'm not going to answer questions on the phone. You have to be present. All right? So let's have a prayer to end, and then I will open it up for questions for whoever wants to stay. Whoever wants to go home, that's fine too. But then, whoever wants to stick around, I will be around for questions. But let's close with prayer. Let's bow our heads to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this afternoon you have given us together. Thank you for giving us such a rich amount of information. Thank you, Lord, that all the scientific research is now more and more confirming that what you gave us in the health message was true all along. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this light, this very special, particular light for us. Thank you for making us receptacles of this. We don't deserve it. Help us, Lord, to not only incorporate it into our own lives, help us to experience the healing power of your word in our own personal lives, but also to spread it. Nowadays, there's so many people suffering from long COVID, which can damage so many parts of the body, but also from lifestyle diseases and cancers and diabetes and on and on. Lord, help us to be your hands and your feet. Help us to take the message of healing and salvation to the world before you come. Be with us the rest of this evening, the rest of this new week that has started. Be with us tomorrow as we finish this seminar. And I pray for everyone present here. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.